Neither the scapegoat nor the golden child wins in narcissistic abuse. Were you often blamed by your parent? Were you often exalted by your parent? And did your parent seem to prefer one child over the other? Different people may answer yes to the first two questions, and this speaks to the different experiences children can have of the same narcissistic parent. If you were often blamed, then your parents' diminishment of you likely made them feel better. And if you were largely exalted or praised, then your parents' insistence on your perfection also likely made that parent feel better. A family led by a narcissistic parent must revolve around that parent to survive as a system. And this means different members will meet different needs of that parent. The scapegoat child helps the narcissistic parent deny that parent's own sense of worthlessness. The parent unconsciously perceives the source of these intolerable feelings as the being and existing in the child. Next, the parent influences the child to adopt these feelings as the child's own. And now the parent feels buffered from what they have projected onto the child. The parent also then feels in control of these feelings to the extent that they can exercise coercive control over this child. Meanwhile, the golden child helps the narcissistic parent believe that that parent is worth more than others. The parent may psychologically merge with this child. And in such a merger, the child does not get to have their own opinions, needs, nor fallibility. The narcissistic parent insists on their mutual perfection or else. And the or else is the knowledge that the parent would psychologically disown this child if they let the parent down in any way. This means the child must live up to an impossibly high standard for the parent's sake, not the child's own. Well, in today's video, I explain how and why a narcissistic parent designates a scapegoat and golden child. Next, I examine the cost to each child forced to play one of these roles. Neither role allows the child to be who they really are. And third, I will describe how and why a narcissistic parent may use these roles to alienate siblings from each other. And watch until the end because I'll introduce the laissez-faire principle to guide reconciliation between the scapegoat and golden child siblings when and where it's possible. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. In my personal and professional experience, I've worked to distill three fundamental aspects to this process of recovery that tend to work in tandem. And I call these the three pillars of recovery. And the first is making sense of what happened so that you ultimately know it wasn't your fault. The second is to gain distance from narcissistic abusers while moving closer to safe people. And the third is to live in defiance of the narcissist rules. I'd also like to mention that I'm offering a new free ebook called 4 Ways to Heal for Adult Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, I offer 4 strategies to reclaim your authentic self from the fake and painful scapegoat identity, learn and apply the science behind gaining distance from narcissistic abusers, know the secret to reducing social anxiety for scapegoat survivors, and a way to accept yourself as the fallible and valuable person you are. You can find the link to the book in the description box below. Why a narcissistic parent creates the scapegoat and golden child roles. Well, someone who is pathologically narcissistic lives in a binary world. They are either perfect or hopelessly defective. And this can create an inner urgency to convince themselves that they are perfect. Otherwise, they risk falling into the abyss of being abjectly inadequate. Shame, despair, hopelessness, and extreme self-hatred can ensue. Children of a narcissistic parent may find it hard to believe their parent was ever anything but 100% confident at all times. The indications of this more fragile internal arrangement are often revealed by how such a person reacts to a perceived slight. There is often a disproportionate, rageful, and vindictive response. Theorists in the field of psychology have inferred from such signs that the outward-facing bluster of a pathological narcissist masks an inner sense of worthlessness. The narcissistic parent's internal arrangement leads to imposing roles upon the children. The parent can deny their fallibility and the worthlessness it threatens by scapegoating a child. Now that this child is influenced to identify as the worthless one, the parent no longer has to. The scapegoat child meets the parent's need to deny their own imperfections. The parent can then insist upon their perfection by fusing with the golden child. This child can do no wrong according to the parent. Everything this child does supposedly reflects well on the parent. This is their unstated contract. Nothing the golden child achieves, however, gets to be for themselves. So let's look at an anonymized example to illustrate. Sharon was a pathologically narcissistic mother to her 2 children. Matt, her firstborn, became the scapegoat, and Marcia, his 3-year younger sister, was the golden child. Sharon, the mother, tried to center herself in all her relationships. She could not experience a sense of we, only me. She married a man who characteristically put others' needs ahead of his own. She insisted on making all decisions about the household and took great offense if her husband ever objected. He learned to keep quiet. Sharon saw men as inferior and untrustworthy. Once her son got to be 4 years old, she began to see him in this light as well. Her son was developing his own will and mind, and this made him less compliant. Sharon worried that she would not be able to control him like she needed to. So she worked to make him feel like there was something wrong with him. If he doubted himself, she unconsciously reasoned, then he would be less likely to disobey her. At the same time, Sharon turned towards Marcia and showered her with praise and attention. She contrasted Matt's supposed bad behavior with Marcia's ongoing agreeableness. The cost to the children in these roles. Well, both the golden and scapegoat child are used by the narcissistic parent. On the surface, it may look like one child is being treated poorly and the other is not, but neither child is being loved the way they deserve to be. The scapegoat child has to adapt to an artificially bad identity. Whatever they do, think, or feel gets construed as defective, if not harmful, by the narcissistic parent. They are treated like an adversary to their parent. Meanwhile, it is their parent who is adversarial to them. The golden child has to adapt to an artificially good identity. Whatever they do, think, or feel gets construed as wonderful by the same narcissistic parent. They are treated like a sparkling adjunct to their parent. Neither child has a chance to develop their own identity in a realistic way. They are either being unrealistically diminished or exalted. They do not have a parent who can even-handedly reflect back to them who they are in the world. The parent is in too much of a rush to use each child for that parent's own purposes. Well, here are 3 costs that both children suffer. Lack of agency. Neither child is expected nor allowed to be separate from the narcissistic parent in a psychological sense. When children in either role make decisions that do not conform to their role, they face punishment of one sort or another. The scapegoat child who expresses pride will be diminished to keep that child feeling worthless. The golden child who expresses doubt in their ability will be shamed for showing weakness. The children learn that they must abandon what they really think and feel in order to play these roles. The second cost is lack of trust. At a fundamental level, children in both roles know they cannot trust their parent. Both have to remain vigilant of the parent. The children cannot trust their parent to have their backs if they turn their attention away from that parent. The narcissistic parent demands their constant attention in this respect. A child cannot trust an adult that they have to keep watch over in order to avoid getting hurt by that adult. Lack of needed attention for themselves. Children in both roles are deprived of the attention to their real selves that they need. Instead, they are forced to attend to the narcissistic parent's inflated sense of self. That self is supposed to be the most important and entitled to others' attention and support at all times. Children in both roles can come away believing that others' needs are more important than their own. Well, let's go back to the example to further illustrate. As Marcia grew, it was clear that her mother Sharon expected Marcia to be available at all times. Marcia knew not to make good friends or have sources of happiness unrelated to her mother. Marcia had to cut off her own desires from her awareness. She could not let herself know how much she wanted to prioritize friends as she entered adolescence in a very natural way. She saw how much her brother angered her mother by wanting to see his friends, and she did not want that same fate. Marcia devised a system to manage her mother's emotional demands. She saw keeping her mother happy as a game. She just had to do and say the right things, and she could win this game. For Marcia, this meant figuring out what would make her mother happy and doing it ahead of time. She would clean the house without being asked. She would do the dishes also without being asked. And most important, she would never complain. Marcia felt lonely, but did not know exactly why. She had no one to tell how she was honestly feeling. She had a nagging sense that no one really knew her. If they did, she was certain that they would be disappointed. Well, as Matt grew, he learned to expect opposition from his mother at every turn. If he wanted to see his friends, his mother would come up with a list of chores he had not yet done. He could only go see them after the chores, but it would be too late by then. Over time, he grew weary of trying to fight her for his freedoms. He stopped asking her if he could go to parties in 8th grade because he knew she would just say no. He also knew never to ask his mother for anything. She already called him selfish on a regular basis. Asking her for help with anything in his life would only evoke more of this reaction from her. He learned to ignore his own needs because expressing them only led to humiliation by her. Matt too felt lonely. He could not tell his father about his mother's hostility. He knew that his father would only blame Matt for angering his mother. Matt was confused about who he really was. His friends seemed to like him, but he was always doing something wrong to make his mother angry at him, again, supposedly. He assumed his mother must know him best and that his friends only liked him because they did not know him the way she did. How the scapegoat and golden child roles are pitted against each other. Well, it's in the narcissistic parent's interest for the scapegoat child and golden child to not get along. The parent insists on a reality where the scapegoat child deserves the parent's wrath. Similarly, the parent has to seem deserving of the golden child's admiration and affiliation. The golden child who witnesses the narcissistic parent devaluing the scapegoat child must make sense of this somehow. And they must do so in a way that leads them to conclude that their parent is correct in their actions. So they have to perceive the scapegoat child as bad. If the parent is always right, then the scapegoat child must be bad for angering that parent. And this can lead to the golden child seeing and treating the scapegoat child the same way the parent does. The scapegoat child can experience the golden child to be yet another adversary in the family. The scapegoat child may perceive the golden child to be doing everything perfect and getting praised by the person who is also persecuting that scapegoat child. And this can build resentment. The golden child may echo the parent's accusations and derision. Even though these efforts may, at their base, intend to get the scapegoat child to do what the parent asked so that they will not get attacked, nonetheless, the scapegoat child may see such messages as just more attacks by a family member. Let's return to the case example. Marcia and Matt grew apart during adolescence. Marcia could not figure out why he would not just play the game so their mother would not attack him. Matt wished that Marcia could see there was no way to win this game for him. It was rigged. Matt thought Marcia loved being her mother's favorite. It made Matt angry that Marcia would be so aligned with someone who treated him so poorly. Marcia wished that Matt knew how coerced she felt to be her mother's ally. She just had no other option. Their brick porch in the back of their home told the whole story. During the summer, whenever Matt wanted to go meet his friends, his mother would often tell him that he had to scrape the moss off of this brick porch first. This was painstaking work. He had to take a paint scraper, get on his hands and knees, and scrape the moss from the grout between the bricks. It required a good 3 hours to do the whole porch. He would complain that it was not fair to have to do this, but his mother was unmoved. Matt knew he hated doing this chore, but his mother was forcing him to. Marcia saw scraping the brick porch differently. She saw that this was something her mother wanted. So all she had to do was complete this chore, and she would advance another stage in the game that her life had had to be about. She felt compelled to wake up one morning and get to scraping the brick porch herself. It took her the full 3 hours. Her hands and knees were aching afterwards. When her mother returned home from shopping that day, she saw the porch and just showered Marcia with praise. Well, neither Matt nor Marcia got to choose what they wanted in their lives. Matt could not choose to see his friends because his mother would actively prevent him. Marcia could not choose anything that might displease her mother. She had to convince herself that she wanted whatever it was that made her mother happy. And this included deciding to scrape the brick porch preemptively in this way. Possibilities for reconciliation, the laissez-faire principle. After surviving a childhood as the scapegoat, one may want to connect with their sibling over what they went through. The scapegoat survivor may find it relatively easier to see their parent as troubled. They were free to know their complaints about this parent growing up, if only privately. The scapegoat survivor may yearn to ally with their sibling to validate each other's experience of their abusive parent and sort of take down the veil or the mask that the parent may have plied in order to make people think that they were something they were, in fact, were not. The scapegoat survivor's yearning may run into the golden child's forced loyalty to that parent and that is continuing. In contrast to the scapegoat child, the golden child may have faced more pressure to approve of all the parent did. This had to be the child's identity in the eyes of the parent. So to challenge the parent in the way the scapegoat survivor wants may threaten the golden child survivor's sense of their own identity. As a result, the golden child survivor may rebuff the scapegoat survivor's efforts to come together and heal from the abuse. The laissez-faire principle. If a scapegoat survivor runs into this type of reception from their golden child survivor sibling, there is little to be done. The scapegoat survivor is left with the choice of either trying to convince their sibling that their childhood was not what it should have been, or surrender this hope and work with what is within their control. And for the scapegoat survivor, this may mean creating psychological distance with the golden child survivor sibling in order to make it easier to surrender this wish for coming together and being able to validate each other's experience. Well, the term laissez-faire is a policy or attitude of letting things take their own course without interfering. This approach can be helpfully applied to navigating the sibling relationship after childhood. The scapegoat survivor can resolve not to try to change the perspective of the golden child sibling. Similarly, the golden child survivor can resolve not to insist that the scapegoat survivor change their perspective. At the same time, the scapegoat survivor would do whatever they need to do to continue healing from this abuse. And this would include putting those 3 pillars of recovery into action. As time passes, the golden child survivor may or may not come to their own conclusion that something was amiss in their childhood home. If that day comes, then the scapegoat survivor and golden child survivor may be able to witness for each other what they endured. If that day does not come, then neither party will be trying to force something to happen that is out of their control. So let's go back to Matt and Marcia once more. When Matt was 55 years old, he got an email out of the blue from Marcia. They had agreed not to talk about their upbringing and kept interactions to be infrequent and more or less on the surface. On this day, however, he read that Marcia could see what he had been saying about their mother. Marcia explained that she had started her own course of therapy, and in it, she was able to realize how she was weaponized against Matt. She sincerely apologized for persisting their mother's attitude towards him in childhood and into adulthood. Well, Matt was just blown away by this email. He was so grateful to finally have his sister be on the same side as him. They started to talk on the phone, and he readily accepted her apology. They got to rebuild their relationship based upon the truth of what they had both survived. Matt learned the truth about what it was really like for Marcia. He was taken with compassion to know that Marcia had to voluntarily scrape the back porch. He said to her, "You know, I was treated like a second-class citizen for all to see in the family. But in that, at least I could complain, even to myself, and know that I did not like being treated that way. It's different, but no less insidious for you, Marcia. Almost like getting hooked on heroin from an early age. Our mother shot you up with praise from the start. You had no choice but to grow addicted to it at the expense of your own free will. To have to supposedly choose to scrape that back porch shows this to me. I wish you'd not have to go through that." Marcia had not thought about the cost to her of playing the game that Matt was pointing out. It felt right to her, though. I want to emphasize that reconciliation may not be in the cards like this for many siblings. That can be something to be accepted in the course of recovery. There is still a lot of life to live if this does not happen, of course, but there's still a tremendous amount of recovery and healing to happen, even if such a reconciliation does not occur. Well, I hope that if whether you were in the golden child or scapegoat child role growing up, or in any capacity, I hope that you found today's video useful in trying to kind of understand how neither person or child in these roles gets to be who they authentically are. And that this notion of the kind of laissez-faire principle, kind of letting things run their course, may offer the best shot at eventual reconciliation if it is in the cards. And with that, I want to thank you all for your continued support and engagement with this channel and all the materials that surround it. And I wish everyone well in your own journeys of recovery from this type of experience. And I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.